What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitmen. It's your host, Steven. I got Joel Thomas in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go over a topic that I'm very intrigued over. He's a researcher, he's a podcast host, and he also works with, what is it? It's Merkle Media? Merkle Media, right?
Yeah, Merkle Media with Tony Merkle.
Nice. Okay. All right, cool. And just be sure to support Joel, support our channel. Head on over to YouTube, smash that subscribe button, like the show, and share it with your friends. And you can also check out the platforms on any podcast applications, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, wherever you consume any of your content. And that's where the show is. If you like the show, you like the stuff that we talked about, be sure to hit that follow button, leave a 5-star review, and turn on that notification bell because we're posting episodes like crazy. But Joel, brother, good to have you back on, man.
Hey, what's going on, Steven? How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I've taken a little bit of a break, man. A little bit of a break. I took about 5-6 days off. Everyone's probably like, "Oh man, what happened to the show?" But it's sometimes good to just take a break and unplug for a little bit.
No, I get it, man. Sometimes you have to do that, and I know you got a lot going on too outside of just podcasting. So, and we've talked about that in length. So sometimes you got to take care of business, man, and get back to it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So for the folks that aren't familiar with you, what you do, can you please just let them know a little bit about yourself and where they can find all your work?
Yeah, I'm a musician, podcaster, and a documentary cryptid hunter would be the best way to say it. And I shoot documentaries with Merkle Media, and we go around all over the place looking for the strange, weird, and we've seen a lot of strange, weird things going on. I've got a documentary series coming out next year, which is going to be really cool. And we spent almost a month shooting this whole thing, and it's called Crowley's Melonheads, Children of the Beast. It's going to be pretty wild. We've got some pretty well-known researchers that are a part of it, so I'm looking forward to get to that. But any other films you can catch at merklefilms.com, and you'll see some of the wild posters behind me. Those are from the films. So yeah, I am also a podcaster of Free the Rabbits podcast, and you can find that anywhere. And my music you can also find everywhere as well. And if you're looking just for a central hub, you can go to Linktree/Joel Thomas Media and just get to everything. But if you're looking for one specific thing, you can just type that in pretty much any search engine and find it.
Nice, man. Nice. No, I love your work. You really, you kind of hone in on a certain topic and you absolutely just do a great job with whatever it is, you bring to the table with all the different series that you do. It's a lot of good work, man. I definitely encourage, the people to go ahead, check that out. And so what are we getting into today, man? It's I'm not even sure if maybe some of the audience is familiar with this because there's so many, like when it comes to the spectrum of what we're going to get into.
Right.
But so tell us a little bit of what we're going to get into today, and if you have any backstory on it.
Yeah, so I know you were asking me, hey, what do you want to come on the show and talk about? And I know we were kicking some things back and forth over a lot of different things I've researched, and I brought up Papa Legba, and you thought that was pretty interesting. And I had my own personal story with this entity, Papa Legba, that happened. And this was back in my occult days and when I was seeking these things. And I do have a personal story with that. And I will tell the story on this podcast, but we'll save that to the end because I think it's good to set up what this entity is and what this entity is a part of. Also, some of the other religions or mythologies that this particular entity could also be. And I think as we're going through it, people will be able to at least sniff out maybe a version of this entity they may have heard of in some sort of facet, right? But it's something that I didn't know of until it happened to me. And then I started looking into it. And then as I came to Christ and I decided to go back down the road and dig into it more, I looked into it and I said, man, this is a really wild entity that has a lot to do with people's success. And we're not just talking about people who become ultra famous or your typical selling of the soul. This could be something very small too. This could be something small you're asking for. And Papa Legba is a Lawa, and that's spelled Lwa or Loa or Loi, and these are spirits from the African diasporic religion of Haitian Voodoo. And this also was incorporated into different forms of Louisiana Voodoo as well. And some people may recognize that name because he is a figure that has been in a lot of pop culture shows and movies. And we'll talk about his appearance as we go through this too. And you'll probably start picking up on, oh, yeah, I did see him on that show or whatever else. But he's also connected to these traditional religions of West Africa. And this is where it starts from. So the diasporic Africans that were pulled out of Africa during slavery. And we'll talk about that briefly too, because that's important to this and why that the Lawa moved from Africa and into the West. So they are tied into the Fon and the Yoruba, and these are people in West Africa. And the Fon are also connected to the Dahomey tribe. And I don't know if you ever watched that movie, The Woman King, with Viola Davis. It came out in 2022. And they were this all-female military unit. And there were these Dahomey Amazons. And they were warriors. And I know a lot of people will see the movie and say, that's, Hollywood doing their thing. And believe me, they did in the movie as far as trying to romanticize the Dahomey Amazons. But the Dahomey Amazons literally existed, and they were a part of this Dahomey tribe, and they were fierce warriors. One of the interesting things about the Dahomey tribe is they were huge when it came to the Atlantic slave trade. So this is where, when people will say that, well, Black people sold Black people, and it would get down that road. I'm not here to talk about all that, but it's important to bring up as far as this goes about why that Black people got to the West. A lot of it was the Dahomey tribe. So they were a major supplier of slaves to the Europeans. It wasn't like the Europeans were just running up in Africa doing their thing. I know that seems to be a lot of the mainstream narrative of what went down, but it really wasn't. It was more of trading and bartering. And what was going on in Africa was war, just like throughout history. And what the Dahomey tribe was doing, they were wiping out these other tribes, and they were taking the people as their own slaves, for one, and they would even use them for human sacrifices during celebrations as part of the annual customs of Dahomey. So they would use them for sacrifices, but plus they would also use them for workers and whatever else they needed for their tribe. And they would also sell them to the Europeans, because the Europeans came in and started giving them rifles, gunpowder, fabrics, cowrie shells, tobacco, pipes, alcohol, all these things for these slaves. So as a part of the slaves leaving Africa and going into the West, they also took their religions with them. So when they ended up in places like Haiti, and this is where Haitian voodoo comes from, this is where these gods and these Lawa came from, was from the Western African tribes. And these Lawa, they serve as intermediaries between humanity and Bandi. Now, Bandi is the transcendent creator divinity. And he is known for creating the universe, everything in it, and he maintains the universal order. Now, Stephen, you're going to get this part right here, and I know this is going to tie into some stuff you and I have talked about on the phone. Even though he is transcendent, he's inaccessible to humans. And the only way that humans can get any kind of message to him is through these spirits called Lawas. Now, what does that remind you of, Stephen, when it comes to this idea of a creator divinity who we have no access to, we cannot talk to, he's not our friend, he is something completely inaccessible? What does that remind you of?
It's kind of like ascending masters of some sort. of something in that realm, either, and it could be because there's gets into like the elves, it gets into the reptilians, it gets into the all the other kind of stuff
Right.
involved with that. But it's that layer, it's that metaphysical layer, man, that I think exists. It's upon our world. It maybe over layers with it in some way. I don't know. I don't even know if the light has anything to do with it. Maybe the dark, these little things with electromagnetics, it can get kind of intense with all that. But a lot of people take drugs to get into this space. You know.
Correct. And you're on the right track when you said ascended masters. So Gnosticism is the very tight correlation to this Haitian voodoo and this Bondi, because the Gnostic God is the monad, the one, the
Mhm.
absolute. And he is also a creator God who we have no access to whatsoever.
Right.
And we have to do what? Talk to these ascended masters. We have to somehow fight our way past the demiurge who's Yahweh and get into the pleroma. And we'll talk about the correlation with this spiritual realm that these Lawa come from as well, and how that it ties very nicely into the Gnostic ideologies. And I found that very fascinating. Also, what's interesting about these Lawa, there's on record about 232, and they all have their own personalities, specific colors, objects, and we'll talk about during the rituals why those are important too. Many of them are equated with Roman Catholic saints, and we're going to talk about how that the African diaspora, when they came over, they basically hid this voodoo within Roman Catholicism and how easy it was for them to do that. And they started attributing these Lawa to these saints that we know. And we'll talk about specifically what Papa Legba, which saint that he's tied into too. But you weren't wrong at all with the Ascended Masters part. You were right on the right trail of the Gnostic rabbit hole that I go down a million times on my show, and how that Gnosticism is very integral since the dawn of time in diverting our eyes off the true God, who we have complete access to, who loves us, who we can talk to at any point in time. And it gives us this false identity that we ourselves can become ascended masters and essentially gods too.
Well, I think that's the point, man, with Gnosticism. It's the fact that there's this divine spark inside of you that you've got to kind of figure out a certain way to um ex- I don't know, exploit it or whatever to reach this godhood. And I think it's all wrapped up with Eastern religion. I think Eastern religion has migrated over into the West. It just presents itself in many different forms.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if that has you know, just something to do with this mystery religion. There's a mystery religion that's with it as well. Especially if the worship of you said how many gods? I mean, there's paganism.
232 on
Yeah,
record. That's just on record. That's not even the amount that has been talked about over time, but that's just is a roundabout on record 232 Lawa.
yeah. I mean, it's paganism versus the one and only true God at the end of the day, with all of this
Right.
stuff.
Well, and it's interesting because the way that a lot of these other religions work, and specifically Gnosticism, when it comes to Christianity, they turn Christianity into being the bad guy. They turn Yahweh into being the bad guy. It's the inversion tactic. It's 101, the inversion tactic. And it's very easy for me to see why people do that, because of some of the awful things that have come out in the name of Christ that people have used. And I think that's also a trickery of the devil too, was to
That's a
infiltrate the
good point.
church in some ways to where things that go on don't look very Christian because they're not. And we have to be able to look at it through a very critical lens when we're looking at both ends of it. And that's one thing that I talk a lot about on the show when it comes to real Christianity at the core, as opposed to what was built through the churches throughout history and then Gnosticism on the other end. They both had it wrong. Real Christianity was something completely different than what was pushed specifically through the Roman Catholic Church. However, I don't think everybody that's Catholic is evil, and I don't think everybody that came through the church is evil. I think that's just such a overstatement that also you're not using a critical lens if you think that, because one reason that there were good people in the Roman Catholic Church was to be able to read and write, to be able to get access to the Bible, you needed to go through the Catholic Church at one point in time. And some of these guys did that. And you can look at guys like Martin Luther, who left when they figured out what was going on at the higher stages of it and ended up starting the Protestant Reformation. So we can look
Right.
at different aspects. It's not a nice, neat bow that conspiracy theorists try to wrap around a lot of this, man. It's very complex, and Satan works in a very complex manner, as well as do the minions that work for him. So we have to look at things with more of a complex matrix, so to speak, when we look at a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Is Papa Legba, is this some sort of entity that's done to appear within like the seventh kind? And it's done through rituals. There a process to kind of
So
invoke this entity?
he's the onset of the ritual, and he's the outset of the ritual. And when I get to the ritual part of this and break down how that works in Haitian voodoo, he is the gateway to the portal, essentially. And we'll talk about the portals that are essentially written into the floor of these temples where the ritual is done, which is also really interesting too. But the Lawa, they communicate with humans through dreams and divination, and they ask for offerings, they ask for all kind of things. But one of the things they do during the ceremonies, they do sacrifice many different types of animals, and they possess who they call the chwal, and I'll break down the chwal in a little bit too, but that's the person who accepts the possession of the Lawa. Once the Lawa takes over the chwal, the person, then that person is able to speak the chwal, or sorry, the Lawa speaks through the person and is able to prophesy to people, is able to barter with people, is able to ask people what they want from this life. That's the point of the ritual, is for the Lawa to come to earth through a person and be able to divinate through them to the people that are there as a part of this ritual, which would be sometimes, a lot of the city will be there for these. So
Yeah.
whoever believes in this religion will be in there with them. And they generally don't allow children in there, and they don't even allow children to be possessed unless it's under some extreme circumstances, which I don't understand why that would be a thing at all. But that's what is said about the religion of voodoo.
Well,
And
what you kind of talked about made me think of the externalization of the hierarchy. It's where I mean, do you think there's a connection with this and this entity where this is, if it's incarnating itself in flesh, to possess a person, are they coming into this world and giving knowledge and trying to enlighten consciousness to a certain point through whatever collective, um, in general, how it gets out there, but it's to promote this the spirituality, if that makes sense.
yeah, specifically, that would be Papa Legba in his role as the gateway, the
Hmm.
one you have to go through to get access to these other entities. But he also ties into the Man in Black, which we'll talk about towards the back end of this too, which I think's also interesting when we look at the man who's at the crossroads, right? When you want something and you go to the Man in Black and then you receive that, but there's always something to pay. And that's the thing with these Lawa. You always pay these Lawa. That's very important. So the etymology is interesting too for Lawa. And because the French who took over Haiti at the time and brought in Catholicism, some of these words are French that get mixed in with this language in Haiti. And it comes from originally the Yoruba language, which we talked about the Yoruba earlier. And the Loa it comes from Allure, which means God, and Baba Loa, the diviner or priest. And the priest is very important in all of this too, because they're the ones that summon Papa Legba to have the right to bring whatever Lawa they ask to come and possess the chwa, the person who is going to be possessed. So it's a process of how this is done. Also, there's a Jean Price Mars, and he was a Haitian medical doctor. He was also an ethnographer, and he was also into Haitian voodoo himself, and he pushed this very hard. He was a politician, and he also served as secretary of the Haitian legislation in Washington, D.C., and he found an interesting connection between Lawa and the Haitian Creole term for law. And he pointed to the term Lawa in reference to the voodoo spirits and how their identification is also with the laws of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, this made me think of divine law and legal right, that we allow these entities to have right to us by going against the word of God. And I've always said that I believe that these fallen entities are some of the best lawyers in the universe, that they know every loophole that they can expose in divine law and what they can try to do to deceive mankind. So I thought that was very interesting when we looked at the etymology of Lawa, that it's tied into law, that this politician who also worked in Washington, D.C., connected to these entities, that they are lawyers. And it's
Huh.
also tied into Catholic law and Catholic control as well.
Yeah, everything ends up getting into the Jesuits' hands at some point. I mean, I think they're on a huge campaign with controlling information and having certain things underneath the Vatican, for example. There's a conspiracy of that, but I think that I just know from experience of other people dealing with them when it comes to like going out and trying to find Nephilim artifacts or whatever, that the Catholic Church usually gets there pretty quick and takes up whatever. They like to get
Them
all
or the
the info.
Smithsonian, right?
And the Smithsonian, right? So, but I do think the Jesuits are at such, they do have a high area of control when it comes to all of the bloodlines, all of, however the the chart breaks down, they're up there for sure.
Yeah, they weren't called the church militant when they first started out just because they were, some chilling schoolboys. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they are trained in the art of cognitive infiltration, and they'll play the long game. They'll play 100 years long game on things to trick us and deceive us. And that's how most of the great psyops have worked throughout centuries, is knowing that this seed that you plant isn't probably going to come to fruition for maybe even 100 years, but maybe 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years down the road, it's come to fruition in a way that only these entities know how to do it. They just know how to direct mankind into how to plant the seeds and when.
Hmm. Yeah.
So let's get into Catholicism since we're on the Jesuit trail. So in 1493, the Spanish colonization of the Americas, and this was known as the Spanish rule, and they began spreading all of their religious beliefs on the island of Haiti. And in 1697, the French colonized the western portion of the island in San Dominguez, and that is where Catholic religion was declared official to the island. Now, these laws started pumping out in 1685, and the Catholic practices among the African slaves was pushed, like baptisms, teachings, doctrines, they were all enforced. And that was also with control over the Haitian slaves with voodoo and their practices of the law. So what they ended up doing was they slid all of what they had learned from Africa about these Lawa, these entities, and they changed it and moved it into Catholicism. And they would practice it under these small changes. So they would hide the identities of the Lawa under saints' identities, which, man, that is really wild. And again, we're going to go to that in just a little bit about which entities they were changing throughout. But to get to the rituals, so these Lawa, they are summoned through these designs called Veve. That's Veve. And they sketch these on the floor of the ceremonial place. And if you look up these Veve, you'll see that each entity of the Lawa has a different one. And they'll use cornmeal ash, coffee grounds, powdered eggshells, anything to create these Veve. And it's a beacon, and it will serve as the Lawa's representation during the ritual. So basically, these Veve are portals, and they're bringing these entities through the portal to interact with the humans, but they're bringing the entity through to possess the Chwal, the person who's asking to be possessed, which I'm a big proponent in portals, but not always in the type that we might see opening up, like a veil opening up. Sometimes it's not something that we see. You can create a portal with sometimes just iconography, right? We know that the Freemasonic pillars of Boaz and Yakin are essentially a gateway. And you've got the capstone at the top. And if the capstone's removed and the eye of providence is shining through, that is the opening between the material and the immaterial. So you can look into, you were talking about mystery schools earlier. Mystery schools also have this iconography in a lot of their writings too, just as much as some of these religions like Haitian Voodoo. Now, we're talking about the Catholic saints. So many of the Roman Catholic saints are tied into the Lawa. We've got Azaka, the Lawa of agriculture, and that's tied into Saint Isidore the farmer. We have Papa Legba, this is really interesting, is tied into Saint Peter. And he's tied into Saint Peter because he's understood as the key to the spiritual world. So you ask the significance of Papa Legba, he's the most important because he is essentially the emissary to Bandi. He's the one that gives us access to the immaterial world. He's the one that gives us access to these Lawa, to these entities across the plane. And he is tied into Peter the Apostle. Simon Peter is who they've tied him into. And you've got several others. Dambala, which is the snake god of Haitian Voodoo. And he's tied into St. Patrick and also Moses.
Wow.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is it makes sense that they would tie him into Moses because what did Moses do when he went to Pharaoh and he saw that the magicians dropped their staffs and they turned into snakes? He dropped his and his ate them up. So it makes sense that they would tie him into the snake. And as a matter of fact, during the ritual, if someone's possessed by Dambala, they actually start slithering on the ground like a snake, and they will hiss like a snake as well, even when they're speaking.
So I was going to say, I think that there is a connection with just, for example, Kundalini and maybe this experience, maybe something similar along the lines of that, they go through this chakra and then they get the awakening and then they have this experience. Maybe this is maybe the same spirit we're dealing with or entity, who knows, just maybe changing its labels on the way. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll find with a lot of these pagan religions and when it comes to secret societies, mystery schools, and any kind of rituals, they may be different, but at their root core, very similar. And you'll find these similarities if you're looking at all of them specifically, and you'll say, wow, that's a lot like this. They're just wording it differently, and maybe some of the initial rites or whatever may be a little bit different from each other, but they kind of all hone in to the same type of end game, right? And to that point, the possession. So According to West African voodoo practices, the spirits of the dead are not able to inhabit one's body unless, like I told you, it's permitted by Papa Legba. He is the one you have to go to first, and you have to offer him offerings first before you offer any offerings to the Lawa. And here's the best part. You may ask for a specific Lawa to show up, like Dambala, but there may be another Lawa that shows up in its stead. And
Oh
you don't
man.
Right. And you have to know when that Lawa is speaking to that person that, oh, I asked for this Lawa. Oh, they didn't show up. Well, I just got to go with what I got to go with. They're
Yeah.
also noticed. And here's the thing about voodoo. They will tell you that all of these entities are tricksters. Specifically, Papa Legba is a trickster. They are trickster entities. That's a known fact. So you can't even believe everything they say. So my question is to you, Stephen, why would that be something you want to follow? If every entity that you talk to in your religion is a trickster entity, specifically the one you have to go to first to even get access to the immaterial plane, why would that be something that would be valid to follow? That's always bothered me when it comes to the mystery schools and when it comes to any of these other religions. It just seems to be a lot of trickster gods and trickster entities. There's no format to where any of these are your actual friend or someone who's actually looking out for your own well-being.
Yeah. I think they focus on another thing. I think they're more and they might be ignorant to it, but they love not the truth. So they're out seeking other things that they're getting a spiritual experience from, and this is their God now, and this is what they want to focus on, and because they can still do what thou will and still be spiritual with a religion at the same time. So I think that's probably something that happens.
You're right on point with that, Stephen. And to that, to even expound on that a little more, sometimes it's about what you can get for you, right? If I feel like this religion's going to allow me to get access to what I want right now and with no patience or what God's will is for me, right? You ever notice it's never about what is this entity's will for me? It's about what I want. What do I need to do to appease this God or this entity to get what I want?
Right.
And Christianity, real Christianity, again, I'm going to really espouse that, is about what God's will for you in this world is. And again, he is a just God, and he's also a God who allows free will. So he totally lets you run around and do what you want, but it's not going to end well for you when you do that. And I believe that that's been the trickery from the Satan since the beginning, is that you can become your own God. God's trying to hold you back from your real purpose, your true will. Do what thou
Right.
wilt, a very
Right.
famous phrase from Thelema.
Right. That divine spark inside of you, it's all the same kind of it's the same lie.
Right. So the possession, and this is the most important part of this ritual, is it's a very important element of voodoo. And it takes place in a temple called the Unfo or the Hunfor. There's two different names for it. And I know you've probably seen, maybe in movies or maybe some pictures of those. They look like shacks almost. And then you go in them and there's all this chanting and drums being beat. And you see all of these. It's a wild display. You can go on YouTube. There's plenty of YouTube videos of Haitian rituals going on. But even in movies, man, they'll romanticize it a lot. And you'll see all of these wild symbols on the walls or on the floor. And it will look like that people are absolutely losing their minds. And they are, because they are being possessed by entities. Now, think about this. The whole purpose of this ritual, Stephen, is for possession. That's what it is. It's a possession ritual. And they're in this room called the peristyle. And first, they have to salute Papa Legba. First, they have to offer him tobacco or candy or whatever that they think that he wants to be allowed to then ask for the Lawa that they want to come. Now, there are two types of priests. There's a male priest called the Hungan, or the female priest called the Mambo. And the term for the temple, the Hunfor, is derived from the African Fawn, which means abode of spirits. So this is a place of the spirits. Now, there's a feast before this ceremony, and there's the pattern, the veve that I talked about, and it is outlined on the temple floor. Now, the veve has to correlate to the luau that they are trying to invoke. But again, you have to talk to Legba first before you can even get to this portion of it. So he has to say this is okay. Now, after that, there's beats, rattles, all kind of religious drums. They're called tambulas. There's dancing and chanting. Again, if you're interested in seeing what it looks like, there's plenty of videos on YouTube. You can go see what this looks like. And one of the dancers will become possessed at that point, and they'll enter this trance. And at that point, they will normally take some sort of animal, chicken, goat, sheep, pig. They'll sacrifice it, and then the blood's collected. And that's used to sate the hunger of the Lawa. So here we are with blood rituals involved with this to bring in this spirit. Now, this gets to the chwal. This is Chual, and it means horse. And there's a reason why it means horse. This is the person being possessed, even. So the act of possession is called mounting the horse. So when the demonic entity, I call it demonic entity, the Lawa, mounts the person, it possesses the person. And it can possess men or women. It can possess children. I talked about this earlier, but they rarely go down that road because they say it's too dangerous. And in this trance of possession, in part of this process, the Lawa enters the head of the chwal, the person, and displaces their Guoban Anj, which is one of the halves of the person's soul. So the Guoban Anj is the immortal aspect of a human spirit or the human life force. So it possesses one part of the soul, according to Haitian Voodoo, and it completely displaces the person. The person is no longer there. And when you see the person's face, it'll look like they're in blind terror, anguish. It looks like they're in pain. But while this is going on, the congregation, when they realize that the person has been possessed, they bust out in song and dance. The chwal at that point takes on the identity of the Lawa, the entity that they have called in through the veve, who has taken over the person. And at that point, no more anguish. This entity's inside of this person, bows before the priest or priestess, and lays before the central pillar, which is called the poto mitan. And then the chwal is escorted into another room, and they will dress the person with clothing associated to the Lawa. So they will actually make the person look like what they have drawn an iconography of whatever specific Lawa that it is. And the chwal will also take on the behaviors, expressions, all the movements of what that Lawa does, and it can be very theatrical. I know some people who don't believe in the supernatural world at all probably think that it's a bunch of hocus pocus. I do not. And you have Dambala, which we talked about, the serpent god, and people will literally slither on the floor, dart out their tongue like a snake. They will even climb the posts inside of the, inside of the temple and slither up and down them like snakes.
It's an ancient spirit that they're messing with.
Absolutely. So this is where it gets to the part of, well, why would all this go on? What do the people really want? So the chwal, the person who's possessed, will join in with everyone with the dances and dance with anyone with whom the Lawa wants to. They will even eat and drink with them. The chwal, who's possessed by the Lawa, will engage in financial transactions with people in the congregation, will sell them food if they're hungry, will, if they give them offerings to the Lawa, then the Lawa will offer money to them or offer the promise of money that's coming to them. It basically facilitates this direct link to a Lawa. So you're able to talk to this Lawa through this person. And this law will communicate with all of the people there, offering counsel, sometimes chastisement, say, you're not doing this right over here. You need to do this right, and this good thing will happen. Blessings, they will give them prophecies, warnings of the future. They will even heal people that are there who have ailments or any other types of diseases. All of this happens at this ceremony. So this is why that someone would be possessed by a Lawa, because it brings blessings to the people that are involved. So whoever in the city is a part of this religion will come there in hopes of receiving some sort of blessing from, guess what, Stephen? From their own mouths, a trickster entity. So you never know if you're actually going to get what you asked for or not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're definitely not getting what you're asking for. You're still dealing with something that has so much variance. You can't believe anything that what's going on is true in any experience, in my opinion. I don't know, because I think that these entities, they also thrive off of your emotions and how attached emotionally we are to things. I mean, back in the day, right, when we were in teenagers, and our cell phone didn't work anymore, we were like upset, or even just today, we're upset about something like that. But that's just an example of how attached emotionally we are to certain things. And yeah,
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember the pager. I used to have the pager, man, back
oh
in the day,
man,
man. Yeah, and you had to send people codes through the pager to know to give them a call.
yeah.
You had to stop by the payphone, man.
My dad had a Motorola cell phone that you could walkie-talkie at the same time, and I was like, "That is the coolest thing ever."
I know what one you're
It doesn't
talking about. It
exist.
really was, though.
Yeah, those were the good days, man. Now we see videos of our past, days, like it'll be there's like a meme video out there that it says, "Oh, nostalgia," or something, or 1991. People are driving up to McDonald's, looks completely different. The whole world's different, man. Kids are playing PlayStation 2 or 1 or whatever. It was just a thrill. That stuff brings me back, man. Brings me
You know
back.
what's funny? I've listened to both of my kids say it. I know a lot of Gen Zers and Gen Alpha now coming up, but they all wish they grew up in the 90s. Like, man, the 90s looks like the coolest decade ever. And I'm like, it really was. Like,
Yeah.
it was just like the perfect balance with enough technology, but yet you were still going outside and you were going all over the place with your friends, and you weren't, sitting behind a screen all day. That I just think it was the perfect balance. And now, I'm not saying technology is bad, but I do know that there are ways that technology can be used in nefarious manners, right? And we know that we're definitely moving towards some sort of crescendo with that, whether that's tomorrow or 100 years from now. But we're always moving that way, and technology is going to be a big vehicle for these entities, very similar to the Chwal, right? They're going to be
Great
riding
point.
the horse of technology
Yeah.
into our brains.
Yeah, you wrapped that back in nicely, by the way. Yeah, that like this is I think what we're moving forward with is building vessels for these things to, inhabit. I don't know. There's the word Okateri and whatever this that is this a way for Nephilim spirits to like start to walk the earth again? These robots won't give any pleasure of things, but I think they'll be able to control and to dictate like they did in the past. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
With artificial intelligence, and I'm sure that that's a whole rabbit hole we could dig in with that. Because
for
once
sure.
quantum computing comes into play with everything, oh my goodness, the game changes. Oh man, changes.
So let's slide into Papa Legba. Let's really get to the nitty gritty of who Papa Legba is and his importance. And he serves as the intermediary. to Bendi, the God, the creator God, and humanity. And he stands at this spiritual crossroads, and he will give or deny permission to speak with any of the spirits in the other side of the plane. And he can speak all human languages. I find that very interesting. Every person that's ever talked about him, he can communicate with any person on the planet. And he is the great elocutioner, is what they call him in Haiti. And he is known for his communication, speech, and understanding, and he's commonly associated with dogs, and we're definitely going to get a little deep on that. But just off the top, it makes me think of the dog-headed gods of Sumerian culture, the Egyptian dog-headed gods, Anubis. We can get into the goddess Bo, Orthrus, any of these dog-headed gods. It makes me think of that a lot. And again, Papa Legba is invoked at the beginning of every ceremony, and his origins did come from the West African kingdom of Dahomey, which we already talked about. Now, he will grant or deny what you ask for. Now, this ties into a lot of famous people that we know now, but one specific famous person from yesteryear was Robert Leroy Johnson. He's known as the first ever rock star. Now, according to his legend, he was living on a plantation in Mississippi, and he wanted to be this great blues musician. And the legend was that he was instructed to take his guitar to this crossroad at Dockery Plantation at midnight, and there he meets this man in black, and the man in black takes the guitar and tunes it, and he plays a few songs, and he gives the guitar back to Johnson. There is a transaction made there between Johnson and the man in black. And when he gives the guitar back to Johnson, he is a master of the guitar, and he becomes the first legit rock star that we know of. And it, mirrors the Faustian bargain. And this is really what Papa Legba is as well. And we look at many different artists. Johnny Cash, he did that song
Oh,
to
wow.
The Devil to Pay. Kanye West has talked about it in his music. I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. Eminem's talked about it. DMX had that song Omen, and then Damien that he put out. Kurt Cobain talked about getting stoned and worshiping Satan. I mean, we're just talking about a handful, right? We're not even talking about more of the modern artists right now that are blatantly putting this imagery in their music videos. So my personal thoughts, though, Stephen, is that Satan can't buy your soul. You cannot sell your soul. Now, what you can do, you can go into these blood oaths, these pacts with these entities. Can they be broken? Absolutely. God is more powerful than any of that.
Right.
I believe what these pacts and these oaths is to make the person believe that when they do this, that they are locked in, that there's no way out. I have crossed over. And in some ways they have, because now you have allowed the entity, the Lawa, to take over you, right? We see a lot of these musicians like Beyonce who allows Sasha Fierce to embody her when she's on stage. We know that many different artists have talked about being taken over whenever they're in the studio. I've heard Lil Wayne talk about it. He in the studio doesn't remember recording. You know what I mean? You hear this throughout, and that is when these entities take over. And it goes back to what we talked about with the Lawa taking over the Chihuahua, the horse, the riding of the horse. So I believe that all of these entities are the same thing. They're just operating under different guises. But again, goes back to what we said earlier on, where when we really dig through the layers, we realize they're all doing the same thing. They're just using different verbiage and different masks, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say something too about the music.
Yeah.
The music industry, and it's obvious, like you said, what is worshipped in just general music today. It's pretty much on any genre. It just kind of changes itself throughout different music. But there was even an interview I saw one time with Bob Dylan, and it was on a 60-minute interview. and he was saying something about how he got to where he was at the peak of his career, and he was like, I made a deal with it, a bargain. So I think they think that obviously there's this bargain or whatever, but I think God's greater, like you said, to destroy any of those fable covenants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I remember that Bob Dylan interview like
That's
yesterday.
crazy.
That's a classic one, man. And
Yeah.
he just had this evil look on his face when he said it too. I got to pay up is
Yeah.
basically what he said.
Yeah, I
And it,
remember seeing that clip, man, when I first started getting into this like 16 years ago. I was just that was one of them that hit it home for me. I was like, "Oh my goodness. The world believes Lucifer is real. Like this God thing's got to be real." And it just led me down that rabbit hole.
I'm with you 100%. And I think that my years running from God and looking at all of these different avenues that eventually it did lead me back to God because I was never happy. And I never had fulfillment, never felt like that I was in a position to be happy in the long run. Now, I was at a crossroads at one point where I knew that looking back on it, this is in retrospect, and I knew in the moment too that I pretty much had to walk away from my kids, and it was kids or what I wanted out of life with these entities. And I know that my parents instilled in me a lot of morals and values that I just couldn't leave the kids because I just wasn't that type of person.
Mhm.
And I wanted to hold on to them while also being famous and powerful and all these things. And that wasn't in the cards for me. That's the essence of selling your soul. You're doing something that you won't do. When you cross that line of saying, you know what, I'm going to do this thing that I really don't want to do to achieve this other thing, that's selling your soul. That's selling a piece of you, right? That's crossing the line into the territory of becoming possessed full time. And I wasn't even ready to walk with God, Stephen, at the time. I just knew that I couldn't do that to the kids. And that was that moment for me. I remember that moment. And it took me a while to get to a place where I was ready to talk to God again. I was ready to follow Christianity and go down that path. But God works in his timing in the way that he needs to. And that was a moment for me where I moved away from this overt occultism and wanting to go down this road because I knew if I did, I would, one, not be there for my kids and not help them grow. And at the same time, they would resent me and also leave them open to these entities being able to, God knows what to them, you know?
Right, right. No, I sometimes even think if these entities, if they have the power to manipulate technology to even give off uh, an awakening experience. And like when I say that, I mean there's a few things. There's like there's this real thing that has something to do with this third eye, that has something to do with this kundalini, that has something to do with having this experience that like you're in the presence of God. And we see them here in the physical world having these experiences, and they are looking like snakes on the ground. There's an expression that's coming off that shows you the nature of what may be behind this whole experience. But they're tricksters, man. They're entities that want to gain your worship at the end of all of this. It's in some way, shape, or form. They want to be worshipped, I think.
Absolutely. And they want what God has.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are willing to give it to him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and Papa Legba, which I believe goes by a lot of different names, but he is this archetype. He's this man at the crossroads. And in voodoo culture, he looks like an old man with a crutcher cane. He wears a broad brimmed straw hat. He smokes a pipe. He's normally drinking dark rum, and the dog is sacred to him. He generally is seen depicted with a dog. And again, to go down that road a little bit too, I started thinking about Sirius, the dog star, and the significance of Sirius as the cosmic teacher, the source of divine will, and the key to spiritual initiation. So this plays right into what Papa Legba is, because he is the source of divine will. He's the source of you getting to the divine. And we know plenty of cultures where Sirius was very important. In Egyptian culture, Sopdet was the goddess of the year, and she was tied to the beginning of the Nile's flood and the agricultural cycle. So we know that she was a representation of Sirius. We know in Greek and Roman lore that Sirius is rising with the sun. That marked the beginning of the dog days of summer. That's where we get that term,
Wow.
the dog days, from.
This is crazy, actually. This is actually crazy.
And then you've got other cultures like Chaldean cultures that call the dog star the leads or the heavenly wolf. And we could tie this all the way into the New Age and Gnosticism now and modern astrology. We know that Sirius is seen as the catalyst for global evolutionary change impacting your consciousness. And it also connects individuals to missions for universal causes, and that's talking about astral projection. We know that groups like Freemasonry talk about Sirius as what? The blazing star, the all-seeing eye, or omniscience. And that's the capstone, the keystone that opens us up to the other side. So again, this infatuation with the dog that is sacred to Papa Legba is directly correlated to Sirius. And again, Sirius is very important throughout history and all these different cultures as being this significance of the gateway to knowledge, the gateway to the initiate to receive the wisdom from the gods.
Who does Sirius parallel with other pantheons? Curious. Sirius is, can't remember.
Well, if you're talking about as far as in the celestial realm, that would be like Pleiades and the Great Bear, and in those constellations.
Okay, because I'm trying to follow this, because I'm kind of making connections with Hermes, maybe Thoth or Mercury. I mean, they're all kind of the same, but just because of the nature of Papa Legba, where's he been at in different areas of the time period? This is kind of like what I'm trying to track.
Well, I'm about to roll into that, so
Okay.
good you brought
Cool.
that up.
All right, sweet. Hey, we're on the same page here. That's where my mind's kind of pulling me towards. So
Right. So
cool.
What my connection was with him was this man in black that has been this enigmatic, if I can talk, figure that's been around in many different religions and lore, and even in witch lore. And this tall man who's generally pretty handsome, racially many different colors, not specific to one. We're talking about Johnson, the first rock star. He was black in that story, and he's been white in other stories. Sometimes he's adorned with the horns of a goat or a buck, which is interesting too. And we're going to get to some of that imagery and what that could mean. He's also known by a lot of different names: Old Nick, Old Scratch, the Black Goat, the Dark Man, the Devil. That's the one that a lot of people know him as. And the man in black, even in witch lore, is not to be separated from the Christian devil. They say he is the Christian devil, but he's Lucifer. He's the usurper, the light bringer, the torchbearer, and the opener of the eyes. So this goes back into the gateway to wisdom and knowledge. This is to take the scales off of your eyes and see the truth. Take the bite of the fruit. Go down this path. It's going to be tough, but it's the path that you need to take to be able to achieve your own godhood at that point. And the dark man also represents the wilderness that's found inside humans and outside of them. And he also represents the duality of order and chaos, which Right. Back into Gnosticism here, because we know that we've got the primordial state, and that represents the chaotic realm of darkness and confusion, and the material world, which was created by the demiurge. And then we have order, the pleroma, which is the divine. This is that place that
Monad.
Gnostics want to be able to get to, where the monad created. This is where the divine feminine comes from. This is where all of these other gods come from. And it, again, ties back into even the dual nature of the man in black. And guess what the man in black's also known as? The Trickster. He is the trickster in all mythos. And he controls and usurps control and creates chaos from usurping the control. So he is very much in line with Papa Legba. Now, another piece of the man in black that's interesting, he's known the man of the wild. And we were talking about the goat horns or the buck horns. What god do you think of with that? Pan from Greek religion and mythology. And he's the god of the wild, shepherds and flocks. He plays music. He's also a trickster, and he's always in the companion of nymphs. And he has a very goat-like, fawn-like body, and he's connected to fertility in the season of the spring. And that's one thing I didn't bring up about Papa Legba. He is also connected to fertility, and in a lot of depictions, he is seen with a massive phallus, very similar to Pan in a lot of his depictions. So here's these correlations that you see lining up with Papa Legba and some of these other gods throughout history and goddesses who operate very similarly. And Papa Legba is one of the gods, or the Lawa, that you will call forth when you are trying to get pregnant. So he is supposed to be very influential in that category as well. Also, the man in black is considered the master of the hidden art. And he's known as the first sorcerer, the shapeshifter, the wanderer, the trickster, and the horned one. And he stole the fire, the hidden knowledge, from the light from heaven and gave it to humankind. You see how that sounds, Stephen? How
Yeah.
nice that sounds. Oh, the wisdom, the fire that Yahweh,
Right.
the evil demiurge, is trying to keep from us.
Right.
And here's this great Lucifer, the first sorcerer. Oh, he's the trickster, which I can never understand why we would follow someone called the trickster, but that's what he is. And he steals the fire and he gives it to the world. And it's the magic and forbidden knowledge. And you brought this up several times in this. And in the mythos, he is to impart the divine spark to humans as well. So he also doesn't have one form, and that's something you have to know about the man in black. He can present himself in many different forms. So this is why I correlate the man in black, who's the man at the crossroads, to Papa Legba, who is also at a crossroads in a sense, the portal, to get you access to the gods you need to then be able to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And I believe that they're one and the same. If they're not several different entities masquerading as the same, I do believe that this Papa Legba, the man in black, the horned god Pan, all of these different iterations are the same thing. And I have my own personal story, Stephen, of my interaction with this particular
Oh,
entity.
what? That's crazy.
Yeah, so I'll get into that if you're ready to
Yeah.
hear.
Hey, real quick before we get into that,
Sure.
is there any connection with Prometheus with all of this?
I haven't found any correlation to it. I'm
Okay.
not saying there's not. That's just something I haven't looked into.
Because I know
So,
he's known for bringing fire down to humanity and
yeah,
helping
I
them. It's
mean,
it's all the fallen angel narrative.
correct.
It's the same stuff.
I typically lump a lot of this in together, and once you look at the different mythologies and stories of these gods, they end up lining up very well to each other in a lot of ways. So, yes,
Yeah.
I just haven't personally gone down the Prometheus route of tying him to Papa Legba, but you're not off.
Yeah, it's just wild too that there's a Prometheus statue at the Rockefeller Foundation in New York City. I've seen it myself. It's kind of like it's wild. And then there's a huge Christmas tree right next to it once a year.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Take what you want from the symbolism. I get it. There's all different kinds of speculative views on it, but
Right.
I think they put in reality in our civilization, in society. They put these things out there. They kind of tell you who it is that they'd like to worship and who they kind of believe in pertaining to history. I think all of this is history, by the way. That this
Right.
has something to do with history, has something to do with a time maybe before the flood that got carried over into reality after the flood. And I think it's all nothing's new, right? Nothing's changed under the sun. It's still the same pattern, different things. So,
Right.
all right. So hey, so you had an experience. Okay. All right. Let's get into
It's
that.
it's a very interesting period of my life for one, because this is when I was heavily involved in Freemasonry at the time. I knew a close friend of mine who he himself was training to, for lack of a better word, be a witch doctor. And he used to travel around the world and go up in these high places with these monks and learn. He would disappear from me for 6 months at a time. I wouldn't know where he was at. And then he would just hit me up randomly and say, "Hey, man, what are you up to?" I was like, "Man, I hadn't heard from you in 6 months." He's like, "Yeah, I was in South America. I was up in some high place with
Right.
these monks." And I
I
was
was opening portals.
right. So
Right.
he taught me a lot during my time of learning spiritualism. I guess that's the best way to do it. And I was big into Crowley at the time. And I would even say back then, I initially didn't even know what I was getting into with Crowley, because a lot of his works are hidden in what you call occult blinds that only the initiate can really read. And if you're reading it as someone who's not an adept or understands what these blinds are, you're just getting surface level content. And then when you do understand the blinds or what the words and the verbiage means, it sets you on the path to connect to these entities. But when it comes to what I was learning from my friend at the time, I was learning how to meditate. You talked about Kundalini and how you can use these practices to connect to entities. That's part of opening up your chakras, and specifically your third eye and then your crown chakra, which would be the direct connection to the spiritual world. And I would do these meditations in hopes of connecting to entities. I know this sounds really wild to people who have never gone down these roads or are Christians now. And how could someone ever want to do that? I can tell you, if you're desperate and you want what you want out of this world and you're not following God, you're willing to do a whole lot. Now, there were lines that I drew, and specifically with my kids, where that was a catalyst to move me back into following a path that God had for me. But during this time, I was seeking out a lot of negative entities, specifically negative entities. Listen, Stephen, I wasn't tricked or fooled into what they were. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew these entities were negative. I just wondered what they could give me in this world. I didn't care about the afterlife. I cared about what I wanted here in this material world. And to say that, there's a lot of people like that, Stephen,
Did other
that
people have the same kinda idea? Like an egregore of this stuff that, yeah, they're kinda all bad, but they hook you up, in some way.
it depends on probably who you talk to, right? Because I believe some people are deceived and they think these entities are good. And I think that they believe these entities are giving them gifts. But I do think for sure there are people who believe that one of two things: either they're smart enough to manipulate these demonic entities, give them what they want, and then somehow get out of it, or they just know that, hey, I want my time on this earth to be full of all the worldly pleasures that I can possibly get, and I'll just chalk it up when I'm out of here. Now, there's also a group of people who believe, and that would be more of the OTO Thelema route of that bad is good, good is bad, and that the Satan or Lucifer is going to overthrow God, that's going to be the end game. And I think there are a group of people that believe that too. So I
Right.
think you've got that side of it as well. So you've got a myriad of different thoughts and patterns. I would say even when I was in the cult, man, so many different ideas and nobody's really got the right answer. I just know for me it was I just want to do the things that I need to get to these things that I can get what I want. It wasn't really about initially the knowledge. Initially, it was about me trying to achieve power, fame, money, just the normal stuff you hear when you hear of celebrities trying to get what they want. But in doing this, I had several interactions with different entities, but this specific time really shook me to the core at the time. And in looking back on it now, I know that God's way more powerful than any of these things, and that I look at it now as, wow, that really shook me when if I had been walking with God, that wouldn't have shook me at all. I wouldn't have even thought twice about something like that rolling up on me. But I was inviting these things, and I went to sleep one night, and to preface it with no drugs, no alcohol, I was sober. So throw that out there. Now, not to say that you can't use drugs to connect to entities, because I believe specifically when it comes to hallucinogens, for sure, I think you're opening up a gateway. I think really all drugs can be a gateway to these entities
Mhm.
being able to connect to you, specifically hallucinogens, but I would say all drugs specific. Even with people that get addicted to them, they'll talk about seeing these things. Now, are they purely hallucinating? I'm not saying that people can't purely hallucinate, but I do think that these drugs do open up doors for things to communicate with you, and sometimes it's just to drive you mad. But for me, I was asleep and I had meditated, trying to connect to something, right? Went to sleep, and I woke up and I was in a state of paralysis, but I could move my head, and I wasn't like some people are when they're in that sleep paralysis and they can't move at all. But there was, and this is going to sound bizarre and it's going to sound probably a little funny to somebody listening, but there was a red devil baby in a diaper floating over my head with wings. It looked like a cartoon character. And I know you've probably heard
Oh,
stories of people
what?
who have had these interactions with what they think are cartoon characters. Specifically, kids will have these imaginary friends, right? That will interact with them. They're younger and they will play into the archetype of a cartoon character. Well, I saw this floating over my head, and I immediately did what I've done before when I've seen entities and I was interacting with them. I said, "Give me what I want." Quit playing
Right to
games.
the point.
I was like that back then, man. I'm not advocating for it or trying
Yeah.
to glorify it, but that was in the state of mind I was in at the time. And I said, "Give me what I want." And it looked at me and kind of swayed back and forth and laughed. I said, "Why are you laughing?" I was like, "I'm here to sell my soul. Give me what I want." And he laughed at me and said, "I've already got it. What else do you have?" And then left at that point. And then I was like devastated. And sadly, I wasn't devastated because like this entity was in my room. I was devastated because I didn't get what I wanted. And then I was racking my brain to like, what can I do? And I think that's the desperation they want to get you to. And even looking back on it in retrospect, that was that desperation. What else do you have? I've already got you. What else are you going to give me?
Huh.
You're going to give me your kids? You're going to give me something else? And I think that's where a lot of the sexual perversion happens in Hollywood, where men start doing things they wouldn't normally do with other men a lot of times and going down these roads of deception because they were just willing to do whatever to get what they want. It's not even something they would normally do. You got to sell something that you don't want to sell.
Yeah.
And that's basically what this entity was telling me. That
Did you feel like dependent on giving it what it wanted?
no, I think
Or
I
to
was,
make it happy, to please it?
man, I think for me, I never was in a mind state where I wanted to please these things like that. It was more of a transactional type of mentality for me. I knew they weren't good, and I'm not trying to please you because I think you're good. And I think that was their game with me. What are you going to give me that I know you don't want to give? And that was this weird back and forth. I've had this happen with some other entities, and maybe I'll tell that on a story some other time, but very similar situation where I'm at this crossroads of the transaction, and maybe I did know deep down it was the kids or whatever, right? Maybe I just something inside of me, the morals, values, I'm
Mm,
sure that my parents, I know they prayed for me a lot, and I'm sure there were godly angels around as well in some of these scenarios, right? So I think that there was something instilled in me that my parents had instilled in me from a kid that I just couldn't cross over that barrier. And that's what the entity was telling me then was, I already got your soul. That's the game, right? They don't really have your soul, but that's the
right.
game they're selling
Right.
you. And what else you got? What do you have that I really want? You know, that's the game. They want you to do what you don't want to do. That's when they got you. That's the blackmail. You know, we
Right.
talk about guys like P. Diddy and some of these other awful people, Epstein and blackmail, right? That's the point. I'm going to get you to do something you don't want to do. I'm going to put it on camera, and now I can get you to do whatever I want you to do. And these entities operate the same way.
Hmm. Yeah.
So for me, at that point in time, I didn't know what the entity was, right? It was just bizarre. A cartoon devil baby with a diaper with wings floating over my head, asking me to give it something else that I didn't know exactly what it was. And again, looking back on it and my gut telling me the kids were probably a big thing that I just, when it came down to it, I wasn't willing to do. But it wasn't until later, I'd say probably 8 months, a year later, that I heard of what Papa Legba was. So there was a girl I was talking to at the time, and she was heavily involved into Haitian voodoo. And she and I got to talking, and I brought up this whole thing. And he was like, I don't know what happened here. I don't even know what I needed to do. And she said, oh, she's like, you talked to Papa Legba. She's like, Papa Legba has shown up many times like a devil baby. And that keyed me
What?
off, and I said, "Okay." She's like, "Well, it goes back to what I told you. He's the trickster, and he will represent himself in different ways. He's a shapeshifter. He can do whatever he wants,
Right.
right?" She said, "He's a trickster." She's like, "You gotta know what to give him." She's like, "You gotta butter him up. You gotta, you know, go into." She went into this whole thing
What?
about what I needed to do to make it work. Because she asked me, "Have you seen him again since?" So like, "No, I
Now, were you
haven't."
with this girl at the same time that you had the experience, or was this
No, no,
after?
this was about a year later,
Okay, that's right.
and
Okay.
I was just conveying the story to her, and she was, again, heavily involved in Haitian voodoo. She lived in the States, though, and I just, heard she was a part of voodoo, and, yeah, man, I'm trying to break down every door I can to get what I want, and she said, "No, he's the God at the gateway. He's the God at the crossroads. He's the one you've heard of, the man in black. That's what you saw, and he laughed at you because you're not giving him what he wants." And that
Wow.
was the very first time I ever heard of Papa Legba, and that was a crazy time in my life, but I do believe that that was the entity that I talked to at that particular time, and obviously talking to someone who was a part of that religion, who broke it down to me in that way, I can look back on it now and say, yeah, I think I did talk to that entity or whatever format of that entity I talked to. And again, I don't feel like I hit the crossroads, the actual crossroads, till later when I was at a very forceful time in my life where I had to make a decision. Hey, are you going to go all in with the mystery schools and the knowledges? Because at this point, Stephen, I had crossed over from just wanting to utilize the mystery schools and utilize these knowledges to get the money, power, and fame to now I was addicted to the wisdom, the occulted knowledge that no one else had. Then it
Yeah.
became more of a drug of what can I learn that no one else can learn that
Right.
I can
Right.
use.
Yeah, because there's
And
layers to this stuff,
right.
So it's
And
how
that's the
deep do you want to
seduction.
go?
Right. That's the seduction. And for me, I became a Freemason and I was in. Now it's okay, I'm in. Where do I want to go with it?
Yeah.
And there were several major things that happened in my life that brought me to that point. And I remember my dad saying something to me on the phone. He's like, and he may have even used the word crossroads. I don't know. It was something similar to, you're at a point right now, you need to make a decision. If you're going to be there for your kids, if you're going to do what you know is right, or you're going to lose them, you're going to lose us, you're going to lose everything. He's like, you may get everything you want. He's like, but in the end, he's like, you're going to be wholly unhappy. And that's coming from a man who also came out of the occult, and he tried to sell his soul to Satan long before he met my mom. And he was trying to become part of the Satanic Church in Texas and almost offed himself because the guys that were selling him on this ended up stealing everything he had and left a note on his bags of clothes outside and said, "Sorry, Charles, we owe everything to our God, Satan. We're out." Took all his money and ran. And he had $100 in his back
Wow.
pocket, and he was going to go buy a bunch of drugs and, unalive himself. And on the way out, he turned on the TV and there was a preacher preaching. And yeah,
Oh, wow, man. Wow. Well, I think your story is huge, man. I mean, it's just probably a few chapters of your testimony, but still, that it's kind of it's cool to see where people have come from, and really that there is nothing God can't do. I mean, he can steer people in however he wants, and he uses you. And
right.
I think that's what's going on right now. I wanted to ask you this: how deep do you think the mystery schools really go? Is this something that all the knowledge is there, or are they still trying to seek it metaphysically or spiritually?
You'll never get it. They're
Yeah,
always going to put you down another rabbit hole, another rabbit hole. You never get there. You look at any of the greats, Pythagoras or Paracelsus, John Dee. We can go down the list. They never achieved what they wanted to achieve. Matter of fact, a lot of them died in misery. Look at Aleister Crowley. And, alone, had all kind of health issues, and essentially that's the way a lot of them died. I mean, even Jack Parsons, man, blew himself up. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, you know,
right, right.
interesting ideas about what that explosion was, who might have actually started it. Was he trying to create a homunculus in the process? There's a lot going on with that. So there's interesting stuff there, but still, there the roads never lead to happiness. And not to say that you're going to be happy your whole life. Living a joyful existence is different than living a happy life, because you're not always going to be happy, but you can always live with joy.
Yeah. No, no doubt, man. No doubt. Well, we're an hour and 25 minutes in, man. Is there a bow you wanted to wrap up on anything, or is there anything else you wanted to get out as far as Papa Legba? Did I say that right? This
You
guy's
did, you did.
okay.
No, I think that's about it, man. I wanted to just touch on who he was. I want to talk about the Lawa and talk about the structure of the ceremonies in Haitian Voodoo, and just let people understand that this entity presents himself in a lot of different ways. And it's not just Papa Legba, but we talk about the Man in Black and Pan and all these other gods. He brought Prometheus, different gods throughout history that play into this archetype. And it's been around forever. It's still around. And, just talking to Tony Merkel and a lot of the interviews he's had on his show, he has had a lot of people come to him and talk about a man in black who either meets them in the astral in their dreams or has met them here in the physical realm and offers them a way to whatever they're seeking. Sometimes it's not money and fame. Sometimes it's just wisdom, knowledge, and that kind of power, right? People aren't always seeking to be influential. Sometimes they want to be influential in a different way, just manipulate the people around them, manipulate the situations around them, and be a trickster entity themselves. People
Hmm.
get off on that. And I think that when you want something bad enough and you're willing to do whatever for it, there's some version of the man in black that shows up, whether it's through another person or some entity that you may meet.
Yeah, yeah, and I've had a few buddies who've had experiences with some of these entities, and they've claimed that they're different kinds. They take different forms, but a buddy of mine's his personal story is where he's connected with these entities through psychedelics and stuff, and he would get knowledge from them to help him through school. And he did go through school with the help of these entities, almost like they are what AI is to us today.
Yeah.
Where we go to AI and it gives us exactly what we're asking for. And I think that's it's something interesting. I'm not saying AI is all demonic, but there's something to where I think these entities they I don't we don't even know what their true nature is. I don't know how spiritual particles work or whatever. I mean, they can do
Right.
whatever they want. Who knows if they are able to function and do things through technology? And maybe this is something that down the future, you know, these entities will be living with us. I mean, when I was listening to Gordy Rose, which is he was the CEO for D-Wave, which is a quantum computing chip company, but he was talking about how in the future these AI synthetics they'll most likely be amongst us. Won't be able to distinguish them from us, and they'll be having quantum chips in their brains and with all of the parallel universes and everything that they get into about quantum, but they basically say that these entities will come through this and be better than you at anything you could imagine to do at a certain level. So, and that's wild. That's kind of like where we're moving. And who knows exactly? I don't know. I just went on a huge rant there with D Wave stuff, but there's something to the meta narrative behind all of this. Is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's all tied together. And when we're looking at where we're moving in the future, you know, I do believe, though, that God exists in a format that he's here with us, and he is more powerful than all of that.
Right.
So I don't fear it. And I'm with you with when it comes to AI, I think it could be a great tool. I think we can get in trouble for starting to use it like a divination tool, which I think a lot of people are asking it a lot of questions. And you
Hmm.
go down that road, then you are, I think, opening yourself up to be deceived by entities. And there have been many people who have said that, man, that thing deviated off the algorithm and really was talking some knowledge that isn't from God. And there have been several people who have unalived themselves because of what the programming was telling them to do. And they're very lonely and basically say, "Hey, it's better for you this way." And I don't think that the algorithm is doing that. I do think that the format for these entities works better than it did in the past. And I think that they prefer the more deceptive manner of now as opposed to the past having to reveal themselves to everyone as these gods like Baal and Apollo and all of these visual representations that they don't do now all the time, right?
Hmm.
So I think that this is more of a technological vehicle for these entities to get access to us. But at the end of the day, if you're rolling with God and you're rolling with Yeshua and you're on that, you are protected and you should live your life like that. Don't live in fear.
Right.
That's the essence of my entire show, Free the Rabbits, is you can go down the rabbit hole you want, but man, go out there, touch grass, connect to the people around you, live life, because that's what these entities don't want. They don't want you helping people out on the ground level. They don't want you to know that, everyone's not evil on this earth. Most people are just trying to figure it out like you, and it helps if you're able to put out a helping hand to them or be able to share some good news, because so many people are living in despair right now. And I find that more often than not in the conspiratorial world. And that was why I started the podcast, because I've just seen people just living in misery and thinking that everything's burning down, and we've got no hope, and that's just not true. Biblically, it's not true. Now, if you're not a Christian, I can understand why you'd feel that way. I know a lot of people that have taken the doomer pill, the black pill, and they think that there's nothing there. And I just don't believe that. And I know in my personal life that God has connected with me in a way that I know that's not true. And I know that there's hope, and I know there's redemption, and I know that there's family and there's growth to be had. There's building left to do on this earth. Everybody's worried about getting off of here, man. Like, God made this earth for us. Why is everybody so consumed with getting out of here? It doesn't matter who it is, right? The Gnostics are consumed with getting out of here. You look at any religion. I mean, even Christians are waiting for the rapture. Everybody's waiting to get out of here. And it's like, yeah, you die, you go to what we would consider heaven or go to be with God, but guess what? He's putting you back here again. So, I mean, it's always about here, man. This was created for us. Why are we not trying to cultivate it and do the things that God told Adam to do, even now, even with all the misery around us? If we are living our lives full of love and hope, then that's the ultimate way to combat what the enemy's trying to do.
Yeah, no, right on, man. So I usually end the show with a positive note, and I think you absolutely did a great job with that. Right, with what you said, because it holds so much power to our testimony and how we witness to others. Jesus Christ. It strengthens our walk with God. We can't let some of these things consume us to such a high extent that it honestly becomes some sort of idol in our life, and we're not detaching from some of these things and going and enjoying life, the little things in life, and what is created for us is still here. And so take it by the reins and enjoy each and every day of it, especially with my line of work. Things are cut short unexpectedly uh, every day for people. So, no, thank you, man. I appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for the opportunity, and to the opportunity that you've been giving me too in the future with doing some work with you. I mean, these are the good things, and I'm glad we're sharing this message because it's much needed and it's refreshing. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
man. And at that point, Steven will be on Free the Rabbits first of the year, and we've got a presentation that we're working on together. So it's going to be really dope, and I'm excited for everybody to see it when it comes out. And yeah, man, I had a blast on the show. Always do when I come on here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, man. And real quick for everyone that's still hanging out with us, if you could just where can they find your work and support you the most?
Yeah, you can go to Joel Thomas. Excuse me, you can go to Linktree/Joel Thomas Media. You can get to everything from there. But if you're on YouTube, just type in Free the Rabbits. You can go directly to Free the Rabbits. You can find Free the Rabbits on any streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Any of my music's on any of those platforms as well. And any of the films that I'm in right now are currently on merkelfilms.com. And we have a whole docu-series coming out next year. And then we have another film that's in the works. Well, we got a couple docu-series and a couple films. So we got a lot going on the film side of it too. So I'm excited for everybody to see all that.
Yeah, right on, man. And real quick, shout out to Tony and everything that he's going through with him and his family. Just prayers to him and to all of us. And because my community is real strong with that. So hopefully we'll get some prayers in the chat here. But brother, thank you so much. All of your stuff will be linked below for everyone. But Joel Thomas, everybody, thank you again, brother.
Thanks, man.
All right, Biblical Hitman debrief. Joel Thomas, thank you, brother, for coming on to the show. Folks, we learned a little bit about Papa Legba. What is that? Just another entity, right? Another fallen angel, fallen entity, Nephilim spirit, whatever you want to call it, demon. Um, Actually, he's referred to as the devil. Like, we covered that today, and the idea that I don't even know if what to call it really, but it says Legba is syncretized with Saint Peter, Saint Lazarus, and Saint Anthony. There's a Catholic incursion going on here with this entity, and that just kind of shows you where the foundation is with that whole thing. But it's very paganistic. It, it's nothing more than just worshiping these fallen entities. At the end of the day, that's really all it is. We talked about the different typologies of Papa Legba in different cultures. There's just so much of like I just feel like there's something drawing me into the idea that this is Hermes, Thoth, kind of like the same spirit, not maybe the same actual person, but the same spirit still kind of going about the timeline, just deceiving. Um, this is like mainly voodoo, right? West African, I think so. I think that's what we covered, but wild stuff. People are actually trying to make deals with these things. Like, people literally are trying to make deals and get something out of their interaction with these entities, and it's complete nonsense in my opinion. They're tricksters. We covered that, right? Like, these are entities that uh, are conscious, and I think that when you're having an interaction with these things, they they want to be on your good side. They want your opinion. If that makes sense. In a good way. Uh, some people have bad experiences with these things. Some people have good experiences. We kind of covered that a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's you making a deal with these things. And Joel, in his experience with the cartoon, little what was it, a baby? Oh my goodness, it's wild with wings. Um, yeah, something like that. I mean, my goodness, the supernatural realm is active. It's active, and these people in the seances or whatever the rituals, in how to make deals with these things so that it possesses people with other spirits. It's like it's a medium for that traffic. Uh, these people are involved doing this stuff. Uh, Now, I don't know. Maybe they think that this is something of light, of knowledge, of divine esotericism or something. And this really grips the people to do this fleshly, drawn out sin. So crazy stuff. I had a good time. This was sorry, I'm over here looking at the screen at Wikipedia of Papa Legba, and it's interesting, right? It's had involvement with music throughout its lifespan, of people, like, incorporating these actual practices. But yeah, wild stuff. Hey, Joel, appreciate you, man. Shout out Tony Merkel and everything that they're doing over there. They're doing great work, and just prayers out to all of them. And God knows what we need. And but hey, listen, that was an awesome episode. Sorry, I'm getting sucked into the Wikipedia rabbit hole. You just kind of click on like little blue links, and it gets you to another window, and you're like, oh my goodness, what's going on? But folks, I had a lot of fun this episode. Be sure to support the platforms. Head on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like the show, and share it with your friends. And drop a comment, man. Let's go. We need comments as well, and also support on the audio platforms. Be sure to check us out on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can consume all your podcast content. That's where the show is. If you had a good time and you enjoyed yourself, and you enjoyed the conversations, be sure to hit a 5-star review on your way out, and be sure to hit that follow as well, and also notification bells, because that just, hey, it's AI helping you out know when I post something. So with all that said, folks, I'm back. We took a little bit of a break, and it felt good. It was a good time to get away. It was a good time to set back a little bit, and just relax. But now we're back on the grind. We got interviews coming up, so that's exciting. So everyone, uh, be sure to be amazed coming up into the future. Got awesome guests coming on. Shout out to all the other guests as well that have supported this show. We're over episode 100, and we're chipping away here, but we've got we're the will that is driving this is God, and this is a something that I'm just being the experiencer, if that makes any sense. But appreciate everyone for the support. I appreciate all the super chats, appreciate all the donations, appreciate everything from each and every one of y'all. I got nothing but love. But that's it for tonight. Gonna see you next time.